even though it's been practiced, for example, within Tibetan Buddhism for 1,000 years, actually science has only caught up really recently, hasn't it? Until what, a few decades ago, there was this view, this belief that actually it was impossible to be awake while you're asleep, conscious while you're unconscious.
Yeah, the prevailing scientific view was it's a paradox. How could you be conscious within the unconscious? But in 1975, at Hull University in the UK, actually, the Brits were the first to prove it. They proved for the first time, a guy called Keith Hearn, and Alan Wolseley was his test subject. They proved lucid dreaming for the first time, and the way they did it, they had to prove that someone was conscious enough in the dream to be aware of the outside world. I mean, that's a difficult. They were like, that's the only way we'll believe it. And it was like, come on, how the hell are you going to do that? And this guy, Keith Hearn, who was working at Hull University, he thought maybe we can do some sort of signal where once the person becomes lucid in their dream, they can kind of flex their pinky. So he did loads of studies trying on putting things on the pinky to see if they could work. It didn't work. And then one day he was looking at this guy having a lucid dream, and he saw his eyes flicking left, right, left, right. And when they woke them, and they asked what the guy was dreaming about, he was dreaming about watching a tennis match. And they realized for the first time, oh, so once you're lucid, the rapid eye movements of dreaming sleep actually become less random and start to correlate with what you are looking at in the lucid dream. So they thought, cool, so maybe we can do it through eye movements. So they said, look, once you become lucid, and they've got the brain scanners on them, the eye movement sensors, they've got kind of muscle tone things, basically things to check the person's actually asleep and dreaming and not awake. And they said, look, once you know you're lucid, communicate to me in the sleep lab through a series of like Morse code eye movements. 2 flicks to the left, 1 up, pause, 1 down. It couldn't be random movements, pre-selected eye movements. And they did that in 1975. They got that, and they saw the kind of on the graphs. It's kind of like one of those old lie detector machines with the ink on paper, but you can clearly see the eye movements. So that was kind of mid-70s. Then in the early 80s, at Stanford University, the, of course, very famous Stephen LaBerge did very similar tests, but he got his peer-reviewed. He got his, published in reputable journals. So he takes a lot of the credit, but he did it first. But the real breakthrough came in 2010, 2011. This is when, for the first time, they managed to record the brain signature of someone having a lucid dream in an fMRI scanner. So the early reports were with EEG, so you're looking at brain waves. fMRI is like a live image of the brain. And what they knew was that when you're in rapid eye movement dreaming sleep, there's very little blood flow to the prefrontal cortex. Your prefrontal cortex is almost entirely offline. The prefrontal cortex is where the neuroscientists anyway would say your sense of agency, your sense of self, your sense of I am having an experience are located. Of course, I'd say they're not located there. That's nuts, but there may be activation there when they're engaged. But anyway, they say they're located there. So because the prefrontal cortex is disengaged when you have a non-lucid dream, that's why you can have such crazy dreams. You ever thought, God, that dream I had where I was the Queen of England, how didn't I know I was the Queen of England? How didn't I become lucid? Well, because in that moment, your sense of self, your sense of Simonness was offline. So the dream could present you with a different sense of self, and you would accept it as your reality. And this is what's happening every time we have a non-lucid dream. We are believing our internally generated hallucinations to be real. Now that's psychosis. And William Dement, one of the brilliant sleep scientists, he said, show me dreaming, I'll show you psychosis. And it is, we go kind of mad every time we dream. So the brilliant thing is when you become lucid, it's like an antipsychotic. Because when you become lucid, you go, hang on, I'm not really the Queen of England. I'm Charlie, dreaming I'm the Queen of England. So now I've gone from the insanity of believing my internally generated hallucination to be real to the true sanity of seeing them as they are, simply hallucination. And there lies the core benefit of lucid dreaming within the Tibetan tradition and a lot of the spiritual traditions, which is that every time you have a lucid dream, you are training yourself to recognize illusion. You're training yourself to no longer be duped by the very realistic hallucinations that the brain presents us with. And it said that if you have enough of those experiences in the nighttime, eventually they will flow over like drops of water in a bucket, eventually overflow. They'll overflow into the waking state, and you will see through the inherent illusion of the self. And that would be synonymous with awakening. Now, I'm still waiting on that one, but apparently it's a potential.